Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, the ACC Championship game. It's at Clemson SMU, and you look at this SMU team, a team that a lot of the national media just kind of cast aside after they took that early loss to BYU. Ever since that game, especially since turning to Kevin Jennings, this team has been extremely dangerous. And, a lot of times on the surface, you'll talk about the SMU offense, which is very, very dynamic. This SMU defense is allowing 4.6 yards per play. That's number 12 in the country. So, yes, they can put points up on the board on the offensive side of the football. This defense for SMU has been very, very good as well. And I think what, at least to me, is most exciting about this matchup is you look at SMU, they've been a very, very good football team. There's no way around that, but they haven't played a roster like Clemson. A roster that has top 15, top 10 level talent on the team. I think that's what most people are most excited. And that's not taking anything away from SMU, where every team they've put in front of them, I mean, they have won pretty dang handily. And now you're going to get a sense for, all right, how does SMU stack up from a talent standpoint against the Clemson team that 9-3. I think a lot of Clemson fans would say that's a disappointing regular season, especially coming off a loss to South Carolina. I went back and watched that game a couple of different times. I thought that was some of the best football Clemson played. And I thought they very well could have won that football game if it wasn't for Lenore Sellers just making a few really special plays. So I think this game, it's fascinating from a lot of different angles. You're going to see a lot of different matchups that are intriguing. Fired up to get into it now. Before we do, and as always, Clemson fans, SMU fans, ACC fans would love to hear your thoughts, your opinions in the comment section. There's a lot of different ways you can look at this game. The amount of support y'all have shown for these game preview prediction episodes has been amazing. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into this one. And I want to start with this SMU offense going up against the Clemson defense against South Carolina played extremely good football on about 90 to 95% of their defensive snaps. Now, those 5% that they did not play good, those kind of changed the game for South Carolina. And so I think if you're a Clemson fan, you feel pretty good about seeing that defensive line really start to dominate against South Carolina. The matchup you're looking at right off the bat, how does Clemson deal with another dynamic dual threat quarterback in Kevin Jennings? They got a couple of times against Lenore Sellers. Kevin Jennings, although probably not as hard to bring down as Lenore Sellers because Lenore Sellers is a little bit thicker, is extremely dynamic, can make people miss in space very, very easily. And, Kevin Jennings, to me, yes, I love what he can do scrambling and running with the football. I think Kevin Jennings and his athleticism, he's most dangerous in terms of getting outside the pocket and extending plays. Kevin Jennings throwing off platform, it's about as impressive a quarterback that we've seen across the country. He's very, very comfortable doing so, and he's going to put a lot of stress on an opposing defense because you got to try to keep him in the pocket. You got to try to, prevent him from extending those plays and being dangerous outside the pocket. It's something Clemson struggled with a little bit against Lenore Sellers. Can they clean it up against Kevin Jennings is probably the question number one. Now, I think secondly, one of the things that makes SMU's offense so dangerous is how explosive they can be in the run game. They're not necessarily as efficient as you might want to see. You take a look at the numbers, 4.2 yards per carry. That's 72nd in the country. So you look at the yards per carry metric and say, all right, maybe it's not a great rushing attack. I don't think that's true because Brashad Smith at that running back position, he's one of those guys that can just change a game anytime he touches the football. In fact, he did so last year for the Miami Hurricanes against Clemson. And I think Rhett Lashley, Brashad Smith, you weren't really sure what he was going to be when he got to SMU. They kind of found a home for him at that running back spot. Has been extremely dynamic for SMU. Kind of reminds me of running back Isaac Brown from Louisville. And Isaac Brown was a guy that gave Clemson a lot of problems. And so one of the things you're looking at is if you're Clemson, you got to be really disciplined with the angles you take on Brashad Smith and how you fit the run. Because if you don't fit the run the right way and your back end safeties don't take good angles coming down field, he's a guy that will take a 15-yard carry and make it go 50 for a touchdown. You saw Louisville be able to kind of hit some of those chunk plays. if you're Clemson, you kind of got to fix some of those mistakes we saw pop up against Louisville a couple of weeks ago. I think the other thing that SMU makes so hard to deal with is how multiple they are on the outside. You see a lot of college football offenses, a really good quarterback with maybe one good wide receiver, maybe two good wide receivers, but that's just about it. And they kind of force feed those guys. What makes SMU so hard to deal with is they got 8 players that have over 25 targets and have caught for over 250 yards. There's not just that one name that you look at and say, hey, we got to take care of him. It's about 5 or 6. Now they're dealing with some injuries. They probably one of the best tight ends in the country, RJ Maryland, has been out for the season for a while. They still have so many guys that can beat you. And we know Clemson wants to play man coverage. So I think normally an SMU team would say, hey, if you're going to play man coverage at some point, we're going to find a matchup that we like on the outside because we're so good at so many spots. I do think Clemson's defense has the personnel to be successful in man coverage because it's a very good secondary that's having some really good players emerge, right? You talk about guys like Avian Terrell, Jaden Lucas, but you also have some safeties that can match up in man coverage. You have some really good nickel play as well. And so Clemson's going to try to play a lot of man coverage. We know that, single high safety man coverage, bring a little pressure. Can you win all those matchups and kind of take away all the different playmakers that SMU brings to the table? And you got to tackle in space. This is an SMU offense that they blend pushing the ball down the field, which they throw it down the field 16% of the time, 20 plus yards. And they can hit some of those big plays, but they can also create a lot of space underneath and create a lot of yards after the catch, over 1,800 yards after the catch this year. That kind of puts a stress on a defense because they can, if you want to kind of creep up on them and try to take away some of the underneath stuff and some of the yards after the catch stuff, they can push it down the field. There's a lot of different ways that SMU can attack an opposing defense. The number one storyline I'm looking for is, can Clemson, for lack of better terms, dominate up front with that defensive line? I don't think SMU has seen a defensive front like Clemson. And so we haven't seen their offensive line block a defensive front like this. Can Clemson handily win that matchup up front and really cause some problems for SMU? That's probably the overarching storyline for this matchup. Now you flip sides, and again, this SMU defense, they do a lot of things really well, and I think it starts with stopping the run and then getting after the passer. They're only allowing 2.9 yards per carry. That's number 6 in the country. And then they sack the quarterback 7.8% of the time. That's 30th in the country. It's kind of no secret what SMU wants to do. Very similar storyline for Clemson. Can you run the football? And I don't know if you run the football for 250 yards against SMU, because that front seven with guys like Elijah Roberts, Jared Harrison-Hunt, really, really good. But can you run it well enough, kind of like you did against South Carolina, where you're staying out of those 2nd and 10s, 3rd and 10 situations where SMU's pinning the ears back and getting after the passer? That's probably the biggest storyline. Elijah Roberts, number 5 for SMU. You kind of got to just keep in mind where he is at all times. They'll put him at the 3 tech. They'll put him out on the edge. They move him around, put him in different spots. He's one of the best pure pass rushers that we see in the country. 47 quarterback hurries, which I believe is top 5 in the country. So figuring out how to deal with Elijah Roberts and then guys like Jafari Harvey and Jared Harrison-Hunt, that's going to be a premium. And then secondly, for Clemson, there's kind of 2 things I'd like to see them continue to do. One, lean into Cade Klubnik's athleticism. You've seen Clemson do that and have a lot of success, where going back to 2023 and even early in 2024, they didn't really do that. They just kind of treated Cade like a pocket passer, which he's taken some massive strides in. I don't think there's any secret behind that. But, Cade has shown over the last couple of weeks in some of those design quarterback draws that he can be extremely dynamic. This is an aggressive SMU defense. They want to get upfield. They want to create a lot of havoc in the backfield. Can you take some of that aggression out of them? Can you take some of that bite out of SMU by running Cade Klubnik and getting him involved as an athlete? We all know what he can do. Really, really good athlete. Secondly, can you continue to hit the big plays down the field? If there's one thing you've seen some offenses kind of have some success with, it's pushing the ball down the field. Now, aggregately, the secondary is very good for SMU. They do give up some big plays. If you're SMU, or if you're Clemson, TJ Moore, Brian Wesco, can you continue to get those guys involved 20-plus yards down the field and hit some of those explosive plays? Probably what I'm looking at there. This is going to be a really good matchup. And I think it starts with, how do you think SMU holds up against a roster with the talent level that Clemson has? If you think there's kind of two ways of thinking about it. There's one, hey, SMU hasn't played a team like Clemson. We think Clemson can really beat them up along the lines of scrimmage. Okay. And then there's secondly, hey, SMU, although hasn't played a team like Clemson, we think that they've shown that they can hold up along the line of scrimmage against Power 4 teams. And that's normally where you see those teams from the G5 jumping up to the P4 struggle early. SMU hasn't really done that. And so getting into the pick, this is going to be, I mean, the line opened up 2.5 points favorites for SMU. It's moved to 2.5 point favorites for Clemson. It's largely a pick 'em game. I'm going to go with the team that's been there before, and that's Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers. Do I feel great about it? No, because I think this SMU team can put up a lot of points and is much more solid on defense than people give them credit for. I do fall under the assumption a little bit that, hey, I think Clemson poses a little bit more of a challenge for this SMU offensive line, that we haven't seen them answer it yet. And so I'm going to take Clemson. I think they can really get after it up front. And I think they'll have a better plan for dealing with Kevin Jennings, because they just got burnt by Lenore Sellers on Saturday. I think some of those mistakes they made in terms of how they operated the quarterback spy and some of the lack of pass rush lane integrity, I think they're going to clean some of that stuff up and ideally take a little bit of the athleticism and playmaking ability of Kevin Jennings out of this football game. Give me Clemson to take this one. Don't feel great about it. Ton of respect for Rhett Lashley and what he's done with SMU, but I'm going to go with the team that's been here a lot over the last decade. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.